Alright, I haven't been able to find a video on replacing an alternator on a JB632 Suzuki Grand Vitara V6 3.2 litre petrol, so I'm going to make a quick video now. First of all, we've got to remove the airbox, so pop out these couple of little poppets here, and we've got 3 bolts here and this Jubilee clip. Unhook this electrical hose and pull the airbox out. So once we've removed the airbox, and of course having previously disconnected the negative terminal from the battery, we can undo our electrical connection here and the earth cable here. So as you can see, we've got these 2 bolts here at the top of the alternator that need to be removed. They're 14mm. If you've got a long socket, that works really well. And then we've also got a bolt down here underneath the serpentine belt, so that looks like it's going to be a 14mm as well. Alright, so I've removed the radiator expansion tank and just taken the bracket off for the power steering fluid here, and there you can see we've got the serpentine belt tensioner just in here. And by simply lifting the timing belt, serpentine belt, off that top pulley, we're able to remove it from the alternator, and hopefully once we pull those existing bolts out of the alternator, that will just fall straight out. So after removing the serpentine belt, taking those 2 bolts out of the top, the lower bolt out of the bottom, I then had to disconnect just down here where you can see this wiring loom is attached to the front. Disconnect down here the wiring loom, and also there's a bracket here that holds the coolant pipe on. Had to undo those just to give me a bit of wiggle room, and I also unbolted this little doohickey here and folded that out of the way, and then just by pulling the harness and the cooling pipe gently, that created just enough wiggle room to be able to remove the alternator without having to take off the shroud and thermo fans and the radiator. Okay, so it is possible to get the alternator back in. Just have to wiggle this coolant pipe and the electrical hose beneath it, just to get enough clearance to be able to slide the alternator into that really tight gap. The 3 mounting bolts, the 2 at the top and the 1 at the bottom, are all the same size, which makes it really simple. And the only other thing to be aware of is this mounting bracket here for the cable actually screws into, or is bolted into, the alternator. So what you've got to do is you've got to get the alternator slid in behind that before you put any of the mounting bolts in, because you won't be able to get that over the driver side of the alternator once you've put the mounting bolts in. Alright, so we've got the alternator back in, done these 2 bolts at the top, 1 down here at the bottom, got the serpentine belt back on, just got to put the bracket back on for the power steering fluid reservoir. That was just for ease of access. Got to put the overflow bottle for the radiator back on. We bolted this little doohickey back on here, and it's a bit hard to see, but just to the rear of the mounting bolts there's a bracket there that the electrical harness clips onto, so that goes back on with the 10mm bolt. And we've got our main wire connector, harness connector for the alternator. We've got the earth back on. Now what we've got to do is replace the airbox, because I don't believe it'll idle without the airbox in. And once we're finished, hook up the negative battery terminal, and then we can start the car. Alright, so I've got the airbox back on, got these 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3, Jubilee clip around the intake hose, and the 2 little body clips here to hold the vent on. Put the negative battery terminal back on. I don't know if you can see that, but we're currently reading 12.7 volts, which is actually an ink. Alright, here we are. acid test. Let's turn the ignition on. And the first thing that happens when it cranks is the battery light goes out. Woohoo! Alright, I'm not sure if you can see that, but as expected, we got 14.2 volts across the alternator.